Hi, everyone. My name is Mickey Hudson, and I am hosting today's Facebook Live with Husqvarna Viking. As usual, I will give you all a couple of minutes just to sign in and just to remind everyone, not to click on any links, especially anything that asks for personal information. That's not from us. So don't click on any links. My behind the scenes crew, Ryan, Meredith, and Thomas, they help keep that clean and keep it out of here. And they also do a lot of other things that are extremely helpful for me. So I always like to acknowledge them. So once again, my name is Mickey Hudson, and this is Husqvarna Viking, and this is the Facebook Live. Today we're going to be talking about machine fonts. So basically the fonts that are built into the sewing and embroidery machines. So without further ado, I do like to get questions from you. So please feel free to ask questions. If I'm doing anything that you would like me to repeat or to show slower or anything like that, please let me know because the feedback does help me. We just recently had my SewNet Facebook Live on quick fonts. So if you have an embroidery machine, whether or not it's a Husqvarna Viking, whether or not it is a MySewNet capable, the MySewNet embroidery software, you can get a free demo all the way up to purchased, but it allows you to create your own fonts with something called quick fonts. So if you haven't checked that out, check it out. It's on the MySewNet Embroidery North America, and you will find it under videos. We're not going to talk too much about the programming or the software in today. We're talking about on the machine, but it's a good reference. So, and it's free. So get. Anyway, I'm going to try and cover a variety of machines, but unfortunately, I don't have the whole collection here at my home. So I am going to be showing you on the Brilliant 75Q, which is a sewing only machine. And we are going to be working on the Designer Epic 2 because that's what I have here. So hopefully I can get a variety of education for you. So we'll start with the sewing only because sewing only does have embroidery fonts or stitching fonts. Now, when it comes to the sewing only, some of you may recognize this, but when it comes to the sewing only, it is going to stitch out. It is going to stitch out like you would if you were sewing. So you can write in all kinds of names, addresses, sayings, quotes, etc. But they will be stitched out as if you were going to be sewing. Now, for the times in between, it has to connect somehow because it's not embroidery, so it cannot cut and stop. But if you wanted to, we'll talk about if you wanted to cut the in-betweens, there is a way you could do that. My recommendation would be to program in a stop so that it will tie off and make a knot, and then it'll tie off when it starts, so that when you clip the threads in between, it won't pull out, if that makes sense. But this is what we're going to start with, is the stitching that can be done on the sewing machine. So again, I'm going to be dealing with the, whoops, you don't want to see that. I'm going to be I'm going to be showing you on a sewing only machine as well as the embroidery machine. So I'm going to switch my camera view so you can see my computer. I'm fortunate enough to have a virtual machine. I did look for other machines as well in the Husqvarna Viking line. But this was as far down as I could find. And I also have the Topaz 40, but the Topaz 40 and the Brilliant 75 were so very similar that I'm just going to show it on the 75. Okay, and there we go. So here's the Brilliance 80, and if it's tough for you to see, I apologize, but this is as big as I can make it. My behind the scenes crew and I, we did work with it for quite a while trying to make it larger, but this is as far as I could make it. So one of the things when it comes to many of the different models on the market is some that have this kind of screen on window screen here, you will find your controls in either this ... or there will be kind of a, I don't know the the shape name of it, but it's kind of like a hexagon, an octagon, something like that. And it would be here as well. But this is where we can go and view our stitches, our fonts, our programming in, etc. Some of you have different machines, so you may have your, let me come over here. You may have controls up above here. And if you look over, you will find commands over to the side that'll say either prog or show your letters. And it's the same here, like some of the opals and others, they will have your keys here. And the same thing, you're going to look for your little A, and you're going to look for the program, prog. So you'd have to look for it. If you don't see it on your machine, pull out your owner's manual and take a look because it's there, I'm sure. I just cannot, and I have tried, I cannot memorize all the interfaces and the front faces of all of the different machines down the line. So we'll go back to the 75Q, the Brilliant 75Q. And when I come over here, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about straightforward. I just want to make a line of words, and we're going to go ahead and stitch those out. So what I'm going to do is I come down and I'm just going to touch on my fonts, and these are the fonts that are built in. So many of the machines have anywhere from like 2 to 4, 6, or 8, depending on the machine, of different fonts. Now, the Cyrillic alphabet is really that Russian-looking alphabet. So if you don't speak that, then you may not be interested in that. But there is still quite a variety. So I'm just going to go ahead, and I personally like the brush outline. So I tend to like everything except block, even though the block really is the most functional. Let me put my little screen on here and see if you can see me. There we go. So the block really is the most functional, but I tend to go to others. So first thing you're going to do is you notice it's all capital. But down here below, you will see now it's below on the Brilliant 75Q. It may be off to the side here on your model. It may be down below here. But that's what you're going to look for. Is you're going to look for that, the capital A, the lowercase a, and the 1. And that's where you're going to be able to volley between the different images. All right, so I'm just going to call this the Brilliance. We're going to go ahead and put the B. We'll go to lowercase I, L. N, C. And for those of you that are used to working on a keyboard instead of touch type like this, just be patient. This little icon here, it looks just like an underscore, and that is your space. So if I want to do a space, I would go ahead and touch the space. And then I'm going to come over to the numbers and I'm going to type in 75. I can go back to my capital and I'm going to type in the Q. And I'm going to go ahead and add another space, and I'll show you why. Because when I tell it OK by hitting the check mark or the OK button, it depends on which machine you have, it's going to just repeat. So as I go down, it's going to repeat, and it's just going to stitch that over and over again. So by adding the space at the end, it allows the space in between the repeat. So does everybody kind of understand the basics of getting to your fonts and loading in a saying? All right. Because for most of us, we are going to program. So there are times where this comes in really handy. It's down and dirty. It's quick. But a lot of times what you want is to program something in. So I'm going to go ahead and hit my trash can here, which is my delete, and it will just delete. It's going to beep at me. Oh, this is why. Oh, no, I don't need to delete it. I'm just going to reprogram it. Sorry. I don't play on the Brilliant 75Q very often, so I do apologize. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to Program, and now I can delete everything. Delete, delete. I want to talk about this really as well, too. So I'm going to just call it Brill, B-R-I-L. Because another thing that happens is, let's say that you put in one letter too much. So I'm going to actually, let me show you this well. So I'm just going to say Brill. So here I put in one letter too many. So I can go and delete any of my characters that I choose at any time. And that's where these little guys come in. So these little icons here are my up and down. So when I'm at the very top or at the very bottom, you will see an arrow with a line indicating at the top or the bottom. What that means is, like, I can either go one at a time, and you'll see how that went away. So I can scroll up one at a time, or I can just scooch right up to the top or right down to the bottom. Okay. So I can just scroll up. And if you see there is a letter highlighted in red on the 75Q, it's highlighted in different colors depending on your machine. But the highlighted letter is the one that is currently active. So this, I can select one of these R's and it's highlighted red. So I can see that it's currently active. And then I can come and just delete whatever I don't need. But any questions there? Remember, I like questions. So just don't be shy. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and go down to the bottom, and I'm just going to just delete all these. And what I want to do is I want to, remember we talked about programming in a fix. I'm actually going to move on over to Meredith, Thomas, how are we seeing this? Because I'm having trouble seeing this, so I'm almost ready to move over to my big screen. But I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put in Brill again. Okay, so I'm going to put in Brill again. So come down to lowercase. And I'm going to put in let's say I want to add a decorative stitch. I can do that at this point. And I can come over and I can select my stitches. And I'm going to scroll over to I want to go to a decorative stitch. Well, crafting will work. So I put in a crafting stitch. And if you'll notice here, when it stitches out, I want to have it flip the other way. So I can come over here and have my mirror image top to bottom and my mirror image side to side, and I can have it flip the other way. And let's say I want to add one at the top. It's like, ooh, I like that so much. I'm going to go ahead and add one at the top. So I just used my quick to the top button right there with the bar on it, and I can add one at the top. So once again, it's highlighted in red, so I can manipulate that one, and I'm going to do the flipperoo. So now if I tell it okay, I can see what it's going to look like as it stitches out. So any questions about any of this so far? Many of us have played with our letters at some form or fashion. So this one does not have an edit, but I will show you. And I just want to remind everyone that with Husqvarna Viking, one of the things that's so nice about Husqvarna Viking is I want to show you what I just did there. I can at any time, if I'm ever confused about what anything is, I can always hit my question mark and ask it. So it will tell me what it is, what that button does, what that icon does. So at any point I can say, what is that guy? That is where I'd save my files. So at any time you can just say, hey, what's that guy? And it will give you a description for it. Now, what I did over here too, which I can also do when I am programming, is this will change my stitch length, and this one will change my stitch width. So let me come back here. Oops, I still had my question mark on. So let me come back here. I'm going to go to my brush alphabet. And I can say, I really want to make this guy smaller. Oh, nope, I can't do it in here. Like I said, I cannot remember everything about all of the different machines. I would love it if you could mention how to make a second line of letters, one over the other. I've done it in the past, and I've forgotten how. Now, when you talk about one line over the other, are you talking about on top of each other? Or are you talking more like, rows like this? So if you're going to do rows like this, I mark it. If you want to do 2 or even 3, and you want to stitch the same thing out on 3 times at once, you can use either a twin or a triple needle in your machine. Now, what it's going to do is it is going to make the stitches a little more narrow to accommodate for the wide needle, but you can definitely use a twin needle and create 2 lines. So when I do like this, if you can see, it's actually, I quilted it first and then I added the letters after. So it's marked. So you can mark where you're going to put your stitching. Is that answering the question, or am I misunderstanding the question? So I'll give you a second to type. But when I'm stitching, it is pretty much treated like anything else I want to stitch with decorative stitches. Is I'm going to mark where I want it to be. Okay. Okay. So some different machines in the line will allow you to come back and edit what you've already got here. And then some don't. This one doesn't look like it's going to. So I'm going to bring in the stitch again and see if it will let me do it this way. Nope. Okay. Oh, there we go. I do want to talk about that. So here is this little guy here. Whenever you see a pencil or anything like that, some of the older machines will say edit. Many of the newer models have the pencil, which is the kind of the universal icon for edit. I think that might help, but I thought I learned a way to do it in program. Okay, so the question is, I think that might help, but I thought I learned a way to do it in the program to make two lines, one over the other and not rows. Okay, so I think I understand where some confusion is happening. So when I'm doing a stitched font, it's going to run through the machine like a sewing machine. So as it goes, it's just going to run through as a sewing machine. So I have to do one at a time. If I'm going to do embroidery, then you can actually do the rows of stitching. And so we are going to talk about that in a bit. But yes, if you're going to do it stitching, we have to do it one at a time. So I can put them as close or as far as apart as I want to. But embroidery, we do have a lot more freedom with embroidery, and then even more freedom with software. So most of us start here, and then we start graduating to here. And then as our needs and our abilities grow, we start adding things, because I call it the big box of crayons. So it's like, as I get better at coloring, I want the bigger box of crayons. And that's what I talk about it. So hopefully come back to that when I get into the embroidery, because if I still don't answer your question in the embroidery, we'll talk more one-on-one, I guess, to see what we're talking about, because I just want to make sure I'm understanding the question correctly. And it may just be that simple. I may just not be understanding the question correctly. All right. So let me go back to this. So we programmed our letters. So we put in our fonts or our stitches, and now I want to edit, which means I can change things. So here is, I can come in here when I'm in the edit. Now I get my stitch length and my stitch width. So again, it's going to depend on your machine, whether it says edit or whether it has just a pencil. Sometimes there's a box with a pencil in it. They all mean the same thing. So as the newer machines come out, the icons are becoming more universal. So what you see in one will be what you see all the way up the line. But right now, there are still some differences. But I can say I want the stitch length to be longer. I also want you to notice, then this is with pretty much all of the Husqvarna Viking line, is pretty much anytime you make a change to the default setting of any of the built-in stitches, it will change color. It'll get a box around it. It will change in some way. And that lets you know that you are out of the default. So let me go. So here's the default. The second I change it into something else, it changes color, which is a nice little indicator. And when you're in regular sewing mode, if you've changed a stitch and you don't like it, you can just touch the stitch again and it's going to automatically go to default. So you don't have to worry about it. But when you're in programming like this, you'll have to manually move it back. So I'm going to make it a little longer, and it'll beep at you when it can't go any longer. And I'm going to make it a little narrower, just because. And remember, I mentioned earlier too here about if I wanted to, program in stops. If I wanted to program in stops after the word, this is where you would do it. So let's say I wanted there to be a stop in between. So I'm going to go back up to my letters, and I'm going to go up. And let's say I wanted a stop right there. I can go and I can put a stop or a fix or a cut. Now, I do want to talk about these three, because when you talk about putting in a stop or putting in a fix or putting in a cut, they do similar things, but they do different things. So if I were to, and I actually misspoke, if I were to put in a stop right there, what'll happen is when it gets to that point, it's going to stop. Now, if I put in a fix, what'll happen is it'll go to that point and it'll tie off and it'll cut. And if I put in just a cut, it'll just come down and cut with no tie off. So those are the three. So do I want it to stop? That's usually when I just wanted to stitch one time. If I want to put in a cut in between, like I had mentioned, I would use the cut function, because that's going to actually physically cut the thread. And then it's going to continue. But you want either a stop, you don't want either. You want the cut function. Let me just tell you, you want the cut function. You want the stop function if you want it to stop and not stitch anymore. So what I mean is, if I have the stitch here, so you can see how it's going to stitch the stitch. It's going to write out brill, and then it's going to stitch the stitch. And if I wanted it just one time at the end here, I would just program in a stop. And what it'll do, full stop. It will not stitch again. Whereas if I do the fix, it will cut, but then it'll start again. So it'll do the repetition. Stop is a hard stop, meaning I don't want you to do anything after this. Okay. Which is the same as a space. A space is something different. So here, there's an icon here that looks like an underscore. And depending on which screen you're in, it'll be in a different spot. But it's that little underscore that is the space. So here, if I put in a space, do you see how there's a space and a space and a space? And then I can add another letter. And that will give you the space. So that is kind of what I did here. So as I was programming these in, I just designated I want 3 stitches or 6 stitches. So every time I would finish a word, I would then add 3 spaces, and then the next word, and then 3 spaces, etc. So I just kind of picked out here. I think I did 4, but, and I always keep scrap fabric nearby, and I always do a test run before I put it on my real project. So I would just stitch out the first couple of words to see here, I didn't, but I'd stitch out the first couple of words just to make sure that my spacing is the way I like it. And then once it's happy, then I can continue on with my programming. So is this Sonnet software on the Applique too? The software is always going to be separate. It's on the computer. It's not built into the machines because the operating systems are different. However, if you have an embroidery sewing machine, you can go to mysewnet.com, create a free account. They're not asking for a lot of personal information, just your name, your address, and password. And you can download the free basic software, which is at no charge. And that's where the Quick Fonts is part of that free basic software. So if you go to the MySewNet Facebook, the MySewNet website, Facebook page, getting my everything messed up. So if you go to the MySewNet Facebook page, it's MySewNet Embroidery Software North America. You can watch the video on the Quick Fonts, and it'll talk about how to do all that stuff. Okay. All right. And I do love the software, so it's hard for me not to talk about it. But are there any further questions about how to program in on the sewing side of the machines? Okay, so you can edit, you can bring in stitches, you have multiple fonts to choose from. You can even save it. So if I went back here, I can save it. So if I wanted to save it, now on the older style, we have these little pockets, for lack of work, but there's these little different positions that you can put them in. And I can go ahead and save it, and I can tell it I want to put it in there, and it will automatically save it. Now, if I wanted to override it, so let's say, oh, I really don't want that, all that spacing, I just want to end there, I can save it again, and I can select the same spot, or I can select a different spot, but I want to fix this one. So I'm just going to replace it. Yep. So now I've got mine saved. Now, the little save folder is one of those, it's great. And a lot of people kind of forget about that. But even though the Husqvarna Vikings are great at setting the tensions, and, you know, you go to the sewing advisor, tell it what you're doing, and it sets everything up for you. And that is really wonderful. But it doesn't always know what you're doing. So for instance, I like to make jean jackets. And when I do the top stitching, I like to use a very heavy 12 weight on top and a little less heavy 30 weight in the bobbin. So when I do that, I had to fiddle with my tension, get it exactly the way I wanted it, my stitch length. And once I was happy, then I saved that stitch. So I no longer have to fiddle with it again. So if you make quilt labels, for instance, and you have your favorite little saying that you want to put, it's a good idea to save it. Then you never have to do it again. So people forget sometimes that we can save our favorite stitches. So saving stitches is great. So I'm trying to see if there's anything else that I have failed to cover. All right. In that case, I am going to come back. If you do have more questions on that, I can always come back to it, because I'm just going to leave my computer open. But I'm going to show you on the big screen here. Oops, I want to go to sewing. So we'll just go to sewing. So it's the same thing with the screen, the machines with the bigger screen like this. So here's the font. If I wanted to just go into my fonts, I do have a few more fonts on here. I have my program, Hold On to Your Stomach. I know I'm moving quite a bit out of the ordinary. So here's the programming on the newer models. So as newer models come out, this is the icon that you will be starting to look for. It looks like the letter A and a zigzag, but this will allow you to go in and edit. So I'm going to just move up a bit. I don't want to keep making you guys seasick. So, and a feature on some of the newer machines, especially like the Sapphire 85, the Designer Brilliance 80, the Designer Ruby 90, the Applique 980Q and the Applique 95Q, which are sewing only. They have the ability that once I put in a stitch in here, I can, so I'm just going to, once I've put in a stitch in here and told it okay, I'm going to close that and tell it okay, I have the ability to come in and edit it from here. So I can just say, I want to change that. I want to put in a stitch. And I'm just going to put in a basic stitch. But I can come and I can edit as I go. Another nice thing about having this big, so the Ruby the 980, the Applique 980, the Applique 980Q, the Designer Ruby 90, the Designer Applique, and the Designer Applique 2, they will show you this in real size. So this is actually the size that it will stitch out. So you can get an idea of what it looks like. All right. But any other questions about the sewing side of stitching? Okay. So I'm going to go over to embroidery. So I'm going to, let me see if I can change this view just a bit. All right. Should have brought up my demo on the, yep. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to yell at my Alexa for a minute. Ziggy, turn off light 3. There we go. That's better. So I'm going to come over and tell it I want to do embroidery, and I'm going to start new. Now, there are different ways to do this. Pretty much on the, like the Topaz 50, Topaz 40, the Jade, I think, is very similar. So if you have any of those other down the line embroidery machines, they're going to be very similar to what I showed you with the 75Q. There are a couple of exceptions when it comes to loading fonts from outside sources. So if you have a font on your USB, but the programming, etc., is the same. So it'll work exactly the same. So once you get your file in there, then you can program it the same way. Okay. But here, if I just go to my fonts, you can see different machines are going to offer you a different variety of fonts. So in the embroidery, I can still use my sewing fonts. So this might be to answer the question, how you did. So I'm just going to type in block. I'm just going to keep it at, whoops, I'm going to keep it at capitals, block. And this is block, and I'm just going to hit the space and this do 12. So here's my block 12, and I'm going to rotate it so that you can see it upright. And I'm going to be fiddling a little bit. So what I did was I hit my rotate. On many of the higher end machines, there's a control wheel in the middle. You can, if you don't have the fancy control wheel, you might have controls on your screen here. If you don't, then you will have the rotate. You'll just usually have arrows. So there are ways to rotate, even though you see me doing different things than what your machine will do. But the rotate is going to be a rotate, whether you're pushing the buttons or whether you can touch your screen. So all I did was just rotate it so that I could see. And one of the things right now is the color of the stitches is the same color as my background. So all I'm going to do now is on the big screen, I can actually change my background color. So I'm going to do that right now. And I'm just going to turn it to a white, and I'm going to turn my grid off. So it makes it a little easier for you to see what I'm doing. So I didn't want you to get confused by all that busy work that I was just doing. So here I'm going to come in and I'm going to say that I want to do the block alphabet again. And I'm going to, and then I'm going to space and then 12, lower my keyboard. So here, once again, I'm going to do it the quick way. So I can do my arrows and I can rotate it. So see, so now here I can come and I can put this on top of each other. Is that kind of what you were thinking? Okay, so another question. This is where I get confused. I have a designer Ruby 90. Does the sewing side of the machine have different fonts than the embroidery side? I don't understand how or why that happens unless it depends on which side of the machine I'm using. That is a very good question. So yes, there are sewing only fonts and stitches, and then there's embroidery designs. Now, when it comes to like the Ruby 90 and many of the Husqvarna embroidery line, you can use your sewing, all the sewing stitches and sewing fonts and sewing everything in embroidery. You cannot use the embroidery fonts or the embroidery designs in sewing. So you have kind of a dual machine. You have a sewing machine and you have an embroidery machine. So the sewing machine, the sewing side of your sewing machine can only do sewing. And the embroidery of your side of your sewing machine can do all of it. Does that help clear that up? So that is why when I'm in sewing, let me go back to my sewing. So if I go to sewing, no, I don't. So I'm just going to switch. So if I go to the sewing side, you see I have 5 alphabets. So these are just sewing fonts. But when I go back to embroidery, I have the sewing fonts because I can use those on both sides. But I also have the embroidery fonts, which I can only use on the embroidery side. So you have 2 machines for the price of 1, which is awesome. Okay. Let me see. There's another question. I have a Designer 1 embroidery stick machine, and I have Premier Plus 2 Extra. Will I be able to do this? I haven't been able to play with this. If you are referring to the quick fonts, yes, you can go watch the video on the MySewNet side. The quick fonts is very similar in the new MySewNet embroidery software as it is to the Premier 2 Extra. So just go take a look and see. And if you have any questions, if you ask them there, I do check. So my behind the scenes crew checks for me, and I also check from time to time. So watch it, and then you can ask me any questions over there. Okay. So to the stacking questions, does this answer kind of that stacking question here about how you put these together? Just kind of give me a thumbs up or not quite, or just let me know. But I can use my my stitching fonts on my embroidery side. But ideally, when I'm doing embroidery, so the Topaz, what about fonts for the Topaz 50? So the Topaz 50 has some built-in fonts as well, just like on the 75Q. So you do have a selection of built-in fonts on the sewing side. And on the embroidery side, I believe they're on a stick for you, if I remember correctly. But you can install the stick, open the folder, and then do it exactly like what we were showing, or very similar to what we were showing. So once you've opened the file, then you can get that little keyboard and program, if that makes sense. So I'm gonna have to double check. I think there's some, the sewing are built in on the 50 and the embroideries are on a stick. I'll double check that for you and answer that more clearly afterwards. Okay. But yes, you can do the embroidery and sewing with the Topaz 50. So I'm just going to, let me just stick with the block, and I am going to do the block here. Now, oops, I don't want a space, so I'm going to backspace. Now, there are some benefits to going up the line in the machine, which I'm going to show you right now. So I'm a big fan of software. So if you have a lower end machine, or I hate to say lower end, it's like just down the line, because there's everywhere from starter machines up to fancy. So if you're anywhere in the middle of the line there, that's where software really can kind of help you. So take a look at the MySewNet website, because it will give you some freedoms that you can't do directly on your embroidery machines. As you go up the line, they start building some of those luxuries in, but I'm still a big fan of software, because you can do a lot with the software that you can't on the screen. But I am going to show you some of what we can do on the screen here. So I am going to come in and I'm going to edit my design. So once again, I'm going to kind of come back, because I did that kind of fast. So once again, there's a little edit icon here. And like I said, it's either going to say edit, or it's going to have a little pencil, or it's going to have a pencil with a box around it. So when you see the edit, if I go to edit, now what this is going to allow me to do is there's extra icons down here. So when I start playing with the extra icons down here, it'll do things to the font. So one of the first things that I can do is I can curve it. So I can do straight line, I can do a tight curve, I can do a gentle curve. So I have tight, medium, and gentle. This I'm going to Applique, and I'm going to type it, wow. And I want my exclamation point. Yes, we do sometimes have to hunt for these. And I know there's a thing there with the exclamation point. There it is. All right. But see how I can change and do nice curves. So it's very, very cool. As soon as I've selected something over here, other things start lighting up. So here I can come and I can say I want it just to the right, or I just want it to the left. Now, where that might come in handy is I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to delete all these. Actually, I'll just tell this, and I'm going to do the quick delete. Oh, I think I froze my. I get very click happy, and you don't want to do that, because what'll happen is it's now trying to do all those commands, and I've confused it. So that is on me. So I'm going to restart my Designer Applique 2. So just a tip from me to you: don't do as I do as I say. Don't get too click happy, because I do move pretty fast, and I do that every once in a while, where I'll just click it too many times and it just it's going. I'm trying to do it all. I just can't do it all that fast. So I'm like that on my computer as well. I get very, very click happy, and my computer does exactly the same thing. So yes, on the Diamond Royale, you do have the fonts. I can't remember if it has the shaping. But if you put in a font and you program in a font, just a word, see if you have touch your edit, and you'll see if they're there, you'll see them there. And if not, then you don't have them. But again, then the software can come in handy. But again, I'm not going to talk about software. So, all right, so I'm not going to calibrate. So let me come back to the screen again. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come back to my fonts. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in and I'm going to bring in a design. So this is the way I do at home when I'm doing stuff. So this is what I'm going to show you. If I want a specific design, I'm looking for an applique. So I can either go through here and scroll through until I find the one I'm looking for. But since I already know I'm looking for an applique, I'm going to come over here and I'm going to tell it I want to do applique embroidery. And it's edge. It's going to ask me, I don't want to calibrate. And I want a little, I'm just going to take my little owl here. Oh, no, let's not take him. Let's take my little monster. So here I can say, all right, I want my little monster. I'm going to change my hoop to my big hoop. And so now if I come over here and I want to add a font, I can come in here and do, so like cool monsters. And I tell it okay. Then I can come in here and edit it and make some changes to it. And I'm going to keep it evenly spaced. So evenly spaced, you see how let me get this out of the way. But you see how it evenly spaces the letters? I can do left justified. It's going to put it over, or right justified. I'm going to go ahead and do left justified. And then I can even change the spacing. So I want to change the spacing a little bit so it's not so on top of each other. So cool monsters. And I can do the love. And so here I can say, whoops, here I can say I want to edit. And I want it to curve under a little bit. And whoops, and I want to change my spacing. And I can create cool little, I like to make my grandkids those reading pillows. So that's where the reading comes from. I love reading. Do we have this capacity on the Topaz 40? Let me take a look. I have the Topaz 40 here, so it'll just take me a second to bring it up on my computer. And I'll take a look. I don't have, like I said, I don't have all of the machines interfaces on my computer, but I do have the Topaz 40. So let me open that up real quick. And it does take a second to wake up. So, whoop. So while I do that, I will pick up the foot that I just dropped. Now, some of you guys with the Topaz 40s and the diamonds and some of the others, the foot that you guys have that comes with the machine is the R foot. And a lot of you guys are happy to use that. And it really is quite convenient because it just pops on and off and it's great. However, when it comes to, I'm going to drop it again. When it comes to embroidery, I almost never use this except in certain circumstances. So if I have a fabric that has a really high um, nap to it, or like terry cloth that has the ability to catch it, that's when I tend to use this because it'll float on top. The other time that I'll use this is if I have sticky. So sometimes I'm working on something and I have the sticky exposed and I have something floating on top. And that's when I'll tend to use it because I don't really want my sensor Q foot to touch down when it takes a stitch. But for the majority of my embroidery, I use the sensor Q foot. And so if you do not have one, I highly recommend getting one because what this does, I'm going to change my angle just a bit so you can see what it's doing for you a little bit better. Because what this does, this is like your free motion spring-loaded foot. So when I'm stitching, and I'm going to lower my foot, but when I'm stitching and it goes down, it takes a step and holds the fabric. So it takes, as it's stitching, it will hold the fabric while it's taking that stitch. So I feel that you get a little more accuracy to it, especially working with fonts, because fonts can be very tight on themselves. Another little tip for, oh good, it's up. Another little tip for working with fonts is when you're working with small fonts and your machine has the cut function between embroidery designs, which we all love, I will disconnect that during my font stage. Because what happens, especially with the small fonts, what can happen is it's taking a little stitch and then it's stopping, making a knot, cutting the thread, and then at the very next little space, it's making a knot and it's continuing on. And with small fonts, that knot feature, it can be a little too much. So when I have a small font, I will tend to, like I said, turn off my cutter and just manually cut those in between because the end result looks a lot better. And you know, I'm one who does not like any extra work, but it's worth that little extra work to get a better look. It also lays flatter because there's not as much knotting going on behind the scenes, so it will lay flatter. And also, I'm a big fan of really, really light bobbin thread. So the 60 weight that you get and wind your own is great. I personally like the pre-wounds or even finer because you can actually get bobbin weight thread that is finer. So normal sewing thread is 50 weight. The bigger the number, the finer the thread. So there's 50 weight thread, and then 60 weight is the normal traditional bobbin weight thread. So it's a little lighter than your embroidery threads and all that kind of stuff, which are up the line. So there's 60 weight, but there's also 80 weight and 90 weight. 100 weight is a little much because I found 100 weight and I did try it out and I was like, that's a little much. It's too expensive. It doesn't really make that much of a difference. So 60 weight, 80 weight, those are good for embroidery fills. All right, so let's take a look at the, let me figure out what camera I'm on. So let's take a look at this. So like I said, I can't really do embroidery on my screen here, but you'll see if I come over here to this, it's not the 3 dots, it's the shape, but it will do the same things. I can come over here and select my fonts. Let me see if I can embroidery. let me see if I can go to embroidery mode. Yes, I know. Yeah, see, I just don't have a way to bring in fonts, but let's see. There we go. So here's the Claridans. These are the ones that are built in. So to answer the question, so let's say Topaz. I'm going to just... And I'll just tell it, okay. And I do not see, I think. So this will allow me to rotate it, to move it, to scale it. So rotate will allow me to rotate it into circle in any degree. Move is up and down, side to side. Scale, I can change the size up or down 20%. So anything more than 20%, and you're going to get really icky results. So you'd need resize for that. But you can scale it up and down 20%. And then this is, of course, the pan. So if I wanted to move out of the screen, that's what that does. This is all the hoop positioning, So I do not see that editing ability in the Topaz 40. And I'm pretty sure that the indication is that it's probably the same on the Topaz 50, that we just don't have that ability. I think where we really start to see that is in the Brilliance 80, the Sapphire 85 on up. I don't know for certain about the diamonds or the old rubies, but definitely if you have one of those, if you would take a look and leave in the comments whether it does or does not, I would love that, because I haven't worked on a diamond or a ruby in a long, long time. So hopefully that does help. Okay. All right. So do we have any more questions about this going on? So I know I'm over time, and but I want one more thing to show you when it comes to back referencing the quick font, which I highly recommend you go watch that video, because I do talk about how to do this. With the quick font, you can then export designs for the machine. So now if you do that, and I come over to my file, so I've already done that, and I used my quick font. So many of us are familiar with like Arial Black. So I just came up here and I said Arial Black. And if I just click and hold, you will see that I get my little keyboard. So it'll do the same thing for you. And then you can just type in Arial. And as you can see, I did outline, which I didn't really think about too well. But this is just from a font on my computer that we all pretty much have. So you can turn your fonts, your TrueType fonts that are built in into embroidery as well. And you can send it to make it for the machine. So I'm able to send it because I have Wi-Fi. If you don't have Wi-Fi, you can put it on a stick. You can save it to a stick and then plug it in and do the same thing. So the editing option, I'm assuming that we're talking about, where's my trash can? So I'm assuming that we're talking about the editing with the shapes and this kind of a thing. So I am going to say at this point on the diamond and on the Ruby Royale, I simply cannot remember off the top of my head. So I'll look into it. But for those of you that may have a ruby or a diamond, if you will type out a word and then edit it, see if you have it. But like I said, I will answer that question. I will go and look it up and answer it in the comments after I log off. But there is some really cool stuff about this. But once again, I'm just a reminder to go look at the MySewNet Facebook Live on Quick Fonts, because that is a free to you. and it does open up a world of embroidery fonts for those of you that are embroidering. Now, and I do want to remind you guys of the next Facebook Live. So the next Facebook Live on the Husqvarna Viking sewing machines is going to be Wednesday, May 4th at 3 p.m. Eastern, 2 p.m. Central, and it's going to be on elastic. So there's all kinds of ways to insert and play with elastic. So I'm going to be talking about a few different options for you. And then the next My Sewnet Facebook Live is on Wednesday, May 11th. And that one is going to be a continuation of the quick fonts. And it's going to be how to embroider fonts from your embroideries. So if you have a font collection and you want to make it typable, that's how to do it. So that will be Wednesday, May 11th at 2 p.m. Central, 3 p.m. Eastern. And hopefully that we will see you there. And I will come back and answer any questions that I missed. And I will answer that diamond and ruby question for you. So I want to thank you again for coming. And I love all the questions today. It was excellent. And I will see you next time. All right. I'll talk to you soon. Bye.